English Reader, Class 7th. Chapter 3, Behind the Times. Introduction to the lesson. Behind the Times is narrated in the first person by a man who is himself a doctor. The story traces his lifelong relationship with Dr. James Winter, the old-fashioned country physician who attended him from birth to adulthood. Through affectionate, often humorous anecdotes, the narrator contrasts Dr. Winter's outdated methods with the modern techniques of his own generation, represented by his colleague Dr. Patterson. The lesson finally explores what truly makes a good doctor, not just scientific knowledge, but warmth, dedication and a genuine bond with patients. First meeting with Dr. Winter. The narrator's first interview with Dr. Winter was actually his own birth, at 2 in the morning in an old country house. As a newborn, he kicked Dr. Winter and knocked off his gold spectacles while the doctor placed him in a warm bath. A parent present remarked there was nothing wrong with his lungs. Dr. Winter later described the baby as fluffy-headed, with a body like a trussed goose and very bandy legs, a humorous account of this unusual first encounter between doctor and patient. Childhood ailments and Dr. Winter's care. From that first meeting onward, Dr. Winter became a regular presence in the narrator's childhood. He vaccinated the boy, treated him for an abscess, and blistered him for mumps. These periodic assaults, as the narrator playfully calls them, were the only disruptions in an otherwise peaceful childhood, making Dr. Winter seem like the one dark cloud, threatening a world of peace. Despite the minor discomfort these routine treatments caused, they reflect the ordinary medical care a family doctor provided, setting the stage for a much closer bond later. The time of real illness. Eventually, the narrator faced a period of genuine illness, lying in bed for months together. During this time he discovered a completely different side of Dr. Winter. His hard, weathered face could soften with kindness, his heavy country-made boots could steal silently to the bedside so as not to disturb a sick child, and his rough voice could thin into a gentle whisper. This experience revealed the doctor's true, caring nature beneath his gruff exterior, deepening the bond between doctor and patient far beyond routine checkups. Dr. Winter's appearance in later years. Now grown up and a doctor himself, the narrator observes that Dr. Winter has barely changed, apart from slightly whiter, brindled hair and a more stooped back from years of bending over sickbeds. He is a tall man whose height is disguised by this stoop. His weather-beaten, walnut-brown face looks smooth from a distance but is finely wrinkled up close, like a last year's apple. These wrinkles vanish when he is at repose but appear sharply when he laughs, showing that though he looks old, he must be even older. Dr. Winter's outdated medical training. Only after becoming a doctor himself did the narrator fully appreciate how completely Dr. Winter belonged to a bygone medical era. He had learned his medicine under an obsolete and forgotten system. This gap in training shows how much medical science had advanced since his early education. Dr. Winter represents an entire generation of doctors whose practical wisdom and dedication to patients often mattered more than access to the newer scientific tools and techniques being adopted by younger practitioners of his time. Views on chloroform and the stethoscope. Dr. Winter distrusted modern medical innovations. He considered chloroform a dangerous new development and dismissively called the stethoscope a newfangled French toy. He carried a stethoscope in his bag only for the sake of appearances. Being very hard of hearing, it made little practical difference whether he actually used it. This detail humorously illustrates the gap between Dr. Winter's old-fashioned approach and the modern instruments becoming standard in the profession, while also showing his reluctant, half-hearted concession to changing times. President of the Medical Association. The younger doctors made Dr. Winter president of their local branch of the British Medical Association, likely out of respect for his seniority. However, he resigned after attending just one meeting, admitting, "The young men are too much for me. I don't understand what they are talking about." This incident highlights how disconnected Dr. Winter had become from contemporary medical discussion and terminology, reinforcing the idea that he belonged to an earlier generation, more at home at the bedside than in academic debate. The healing touch. Despite his outdated methods, Dr. Winter's patients did remarkably well, thanks to what the narrator calls his healing touch, a magnetic quality that defies explanation or analysis, yet is clearly real. His mere presence fills patients with hopefulness and vitality. Disease affects him personally, making him angry and impatient, much as dust troubles a careful housewife. He responds to illness with energetic determination, treating it like an unwelcome intruder that must be dealt with at once, showing his deep personal investment in every patient's recovery. Dr. Winter's true value shines brightest when death approaches. He tries to shoo death out of the room, as though it were an intrusive hen, but when the intruder cannot be dislodged and a patient is truly dying, his presence becomes of more avail than all the drugs in his surgery. Dying patients cling to his hand, drawing courage from his vigor to face the end. His kindly, wind-beaten face has been the last earthly impression many a sufferer has carried into the unknown. Arrival of Dr. Patterson and the narrator. When Dr. Patterson and the narrator, both young, energetic and up-to-date, settled in the district, Dr. Winter received them cordially and would have been happy to be relieved of some patients. However, the local patients continued to consult him despite the newcomer's modern instruments and latest techniques. This left the two young doctors relatively neglected professionally, even though they were personally fond of the old doctor, setting up the story's central contrast between traditional and modern medical practice. Though Patterson and the narrator loved Dr. Winter personally, they privately criticized the patient's deplorable lack of judgment in preferring an old-fashioned doctor over trained young professionals with modern equipment. This captures a recurring tension: trust built on warmth and familiarity versus objective competence based on scientific training. The patient's loyalty, though it seems irrational to the younger doctors, ultimately proves meaningful, foreshadowing how the narrator himself later chooses Dr. Winter over Patterson. Dr. Patterson firmly believed that patients had a right to expect their doctor to know the difference between conditions such as a heart murmur and a bronchial infection. He argued that an analytical, scientific frame of mind mattered far more than a merely sympathetic one. This view represents the modern, technical school of medicine that values diagnostic precision above emotional connection, standing in direct contrast to Dr. Winter's old-fashioned, warmth-based approach, which nonetheless continued to win the patient's deeper trust. Soon after this discussion, an epidemic of influenza broke out, and all three doctors were worked to death. One morning, the narrator met a pale, fagged-out Patterson, who made the same remark about the narrator's own tired appearance. This shared exhaustion shows how demanding the epidemic had become for the overworked young doctors, setting the stage for the story's ironic climax, in which the narrator himself falls seriously ill and must decide which doctor to send for. By evening, the narrator could no longer disguise the fact that he was seriously unwell, suffering from a splitting headache and pains in every joint. Realizing he needed medical advice without delay, his first thought was naturally of Patterson, his young, modern colleague. However, the idea of Patterson had suddenly become repugnant to him. He remembered Patterson's cold, critical attitude, endless questions and tests, and instead wanted something more soothing and genial, revealing his true preference once he himself became the patient. The ironic ending. The narrator asks his housekeeper, Mrs. Hudson, to fetch old Dr. Winter instead of Patterson, wanting his comforting, gentle care rather than clinical efficiency. Mrs. Hudson returns with unexpected news. Dr. Winter will come around in an hour or so, but he has just been called in to attend to Dr. Patterson. This surprising twist reveals that Patterson, too, chose Dr. Winter over the narrator when he fell ill, delivering the story's central irony that both modern doctors instinctively trust the old-fashioned doctor above each other.